Well, we got a hot one today. I mean, I don't know a topic that is hotter and a bigger part of our investment process that we go through in our life or other parts of our life. It's not all about money, and that topic is risk. And I'm happy, of course, to have Chris Pedersen and Daryl Balls with us. And they always, in fact, we had so much fun talking about this. I wished we had recorded the casual conversation that we had, but it is, I think, one of the most important topics that we need to understand. We need to understand about how it works out there in real life. We need to understand how it works inside and our emotional response to risk coming in to our life. And we need to give, I think, learn to give really good perspective to what we can and can't know about risk and what we can and can't do to manage it. For years, the only quote that I know that was original to me, and it's not an original thought, but I have said for years that there is no risk in the past. We always know what we should have done. And that's true because once something has happened, we know that we should have written a check back in 1986, maybe 10,000 would have been enough to buy Microsoft stock. And maybe somebody could say that about cryptocurrency. But yes, because we know what happened, it's a piece of cake to know what we should have done. And we're in the business of trying to educate people about what to do for something that we actually don't know what is going to happen. So I am very excited to have a chance to talk about risk and I want to share just a little personal story about risk. I I think I'm a really good teacher about risk, and yet I'm a terrible student. And I look at my life as a manager of a body that is supposed to be healthy, but in fact, what I've carried around with me for a lifetime is a body that is overweight, even though I've been on a diet since the fifth grade. And I have, with a sense of humor to it, noted that I've lost thousands of pounds over my life, and it's true. And I have high blood pressure, and I have high cholesterol, and I am a diabetic. And so you would think, oh, well, okay, with those problems, here's the list of things you need to do, Mr. Merriman, and you put it on a 3x5 card, and I got to get that card out every day and read it. But oh no, I don't want to take that card out and read it because, well, I love to eat, and I love to eat things that aren't particularly good for me. And so I have been a terrible, terrible disciplinarian when it comes to my health and managing the risk of bad health. The good fortune is, just as the mutual fund industry has the target date fund, I have a doctor who writes prescriptions for medications that I take. And in fact, I would have to guess that between the 7 stents I carry around in my body and all those medications I take for those things that I've listed, I'm doing great. And I'm sure 50 years ago I would be long gone. But today it is amazing what they can do for people who aren't very disciplined. So I understand that managing risk is not an easy a process for a lot of us. And so we're looking for magic. We're looking to see if we can identify what is the magic button? What is the belief system that we can help you create that's going to give you the highest probability of getting the premium for the risk that you take? And Rich Buck, who's been writing, I've been writing with him, he's been writing with me for about 30 years, once told me, he said that risk is the possibility of losing something of value. And so I am hoping that we'll explore this topic today in ways that will somehow help give you maybe a better perspective, or maybe a way to corral the emotions that have gotten in the way of being a successful long-term investor. So, with all that, I turn to the brains of the outfit here. Daryl and Chris, I know, have strong feelings about risk, and Chris, why don't you take the mic first here and talk about risk and how you think about it, and how you manage it when the going gets tough.
Well, at first, I want to acknowledge that we're all talented in different ways in different situations. And, you were very self-deprecating there to talk about this area of your life where you struggle. But I genuinely believe self-esteem comes from self-mastery, and you strike me as somebody who has self-esteem. So, although you may not have self-mastery in the food department, you have it in other places. You have it in the ability to do a phenomenal amount of work on the foundation and take initiative and drive yourself to help other people through the work the foundation does. I think that same thing applies to investors. Investors will be better or worse at different parts of it. And many people may be really strong in self-discipline in one part of their life and not in another part of their life. I mean, you yourself use a financial advisor because you
Yeah.
don't want to be in there having to do the rebalancing and the all of the nuts and bolts of running your portfolio. And there may be a lot of listeners who feel that same way. I totally agree with you that risk is the chance of loss or the chance that things don't come out as expected. So we invest in these portfolios and we look back at our history with an expectation of where things are going to go, but we can't promise that they're actually going to happen that way in the future. In fact, there's a strong irony here. We ask buy and hold investors to invest with conviction, to invest with very little to no possibility of change down the road, and stay the course, right? I love Jack Bogle's 6 words of advice: buy right, hold tight, don't peek. I mean, that says, it's like a marriage. You're not going to second guess this thing, yet we promise them nothing certain. we, we say we want you to be married with 100% fidelity, and maybe it'll be happy. We don't really know for sure. It's highly, highly likely it will be based on the past. But there are long periods of time when things don't meet that expectation. So risk is all of that uncertainty that, you may lose money, the market may go up and down, things may not materialize as you expected. And fortunately, we have a lot of tools to mitigate the risk. We have diversification as a really fundamental one, investing in a wide range of companies, wide range of assets, keeping expenses low. There's a lot of tactical things we can do. The part that I think is the greatest mystery in managing risk is the human part. When we look in the mirror, one of the greatest risks we have is what we see. It's that person on the other side of the mirror who has all these faults and foibles and sensitivities to the news of the day, the fear of the crowd, the emotion of having seen a paper loss and potentially locking it in by selling at the wrong time. Something I've done at least once in my life, twice I can think of that are both specific big examples. So it's that aspect of the risk, the behavioral part of the risk. I don't really know how to change for people necessarily, but it's really important you know who you are and then find a solution that helps you mitigate the risks that are intrinsic in who you are. And we can talk more about that. But anyway, that was probably more than you wanted in an initial
Oh.
answer, but that's my quick thoughts on risk. Yeah.
And before Daryl comments, Chris, can you give me an idea of when you think about the risk of loss, what loss is acceptable and what loss is unacceptable? Does your mind work that way?
Well, I think it depends on who you are and where you are in life. So we've been retired now for about 7 years. When we retired, we told our kids that the number one objective was to manage our risks in such a way that we didn't have to move in with them.
I said,
And they totally agreed with that. They said, yes, please do that. Do that. Whatever that is, do
yeah.
that. They didn't want us to have to move in with them either. And, now we've been retired for long enough that we can look at our financials and feel more secure about them because we know that the investments are doing kind of what they were supposed to do, and the market goes up and down kind of the way it's supposed to do, and we can manage our living expenses to be comfortable within the money available to us. And so now we look at the risk a little bit differently. It's how generous can we be in various facets of our life, uh, and live the richest life we can in the time that we have left, which is a different risk because that could be tomorrow, it could be 20 years, 40 years from now, I don't know.
Mhm.
To to really have a rich life, which is a very different perspective. So how much can we lose today is more than when we first started because the markets have done really well.
Yeah.
But as long as it doesn't put us in a position where we would be uncomfortable living in the kind of constrained life we lived during COVID, and that was fine,
Mm.
we'll be okay. And so it really depends on where you are, I think, and what your needs are, and how much you've saved and how much you can tolerate in terms of the ups and downs of the market and the uncertainties.
That's great. And Daryl, what do you say about risk?
Well, to me, risk is the chance of an unexpected outcome that has a negative impact on you, whether it's financial or anything else. And that varies from individual to individual because we all have different circumstances, whether they're financial or family or other interpersonal relationships or anything else. So I think risk is very personal. You have to know, like Chris says, you have to really know the person on the other side of that mirror. And that's hard to do because you may think you know what you would do in a certain situation or a certain set of circumstances. But in the event, that isn't always what happens. It's a little bit of do as I say, not as I do kind of thing where yeah, I know what I should do, but I don't really want to do that. And that's difficult to know ahead of time. I mean, if the father of buy and hold, John Bogle, I mean, he's not really the father of it, I suspect, but if the main proponent of buy and hold, John Bogle, can not buy and hold, maybe when everything said you should, then what does that say about the rest of us? Okay, so
Mhm.
so it's a hard thing to do. You have to know thyself, and it's difficult to do. I'm a retired engineer, and so I try to think about things in a more analytic way, at least to provide an initial framework to look at things. And sometimes that helps, and sometimes it doesn't. but when it does help, it helps because it works to solidify understanding of your options and what they can do to help you mitigate a specific risk. And so that's the way I think about risk. It's much less complete and thorough maybe than the way Chris thinks about it. But what can I say? I'm not Chris.
Well, and
None
when
of us are.
and I know when we were having a casual conversation, you shared some an interesting table of risk, and can you share that with us here now and talk a
Yeah,
little bit about that? How you process information?
yeah. Let
And
me
by the
find.
way, do you think this would be the way that most engineers would process it? Is this something you learn being an engineer that is uh, uh, likely to be common amongst folks that have had this background?
I hesitate to speak for most engineers. Um, the the way this is the way a lot of system engineers, I think about risk.
Okay.
Um, Risks have two aspects. They have, well, how likely is it this is going to happen? You know, it can be, well, it's pretty darn sure this is likely to come up at some point or another. To this will never happen, which is probably not true, but it may be rare or exceedingly rare. The other axis that we tended to look at risk was, well, okay, so it does happen. What's the impact?
Mhm.
And a lot of times the impact is not great, but sometimes it's large or catastrophic. And trying to think about risks along those two axes helps you understand which risks you need to work on, and which risks you need to think about how you're going to mitigate them. And the way we did that was with what we call the risk action matrix, if you will, where you have different kinds of likelihoods and you can put probabilities on them. These are objective or subjective probabilities. You can make them, there are many different ways to do this, and you can weight them with different weights. This is one weight that I've used because it sometimes they're just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes they're more like this because the impact or the likelihood is not linear necessarily. So when you do that, and you have this matrix put together, then you can multiply the impact weight by the probability weight, and you get a risk score, if you will. And what this does is help you understand, well, what's the severity of this particular risk. So if you look at these and you kind of color code them with a different scale, and again, these scales are subjective. So, but things in the red over here are things you really need to worry about. You need to fix these because they can kill you, especially if something catastrophic is almost certain to happen. You need to fix that. If something is possible, but it doesn't really mean anything, then you don't really need to worry about it. Most risks that you think of as risks anyway tend to fall in this lower quadrant or lower half, triangular half of the scale. So that's the way I try to categorize risks, or at least I tried to categorize risks when I was an
So,
engineer.
so out of
Um, I
curiosity,
had
Daryl, what would
yeah.
be, as an investor, what would be down there in that almost certain to happen, and it's big time catastrophic if it does?
Well, I can think of
Having all your money in one company?
um, I don't know that that would necessarily be an almost certain thing necessarily, but it
Mhm.
could be. Um, I would think that if you have a um, if let's think about it this way. Suppose your only source of income in your portfolio or in your retired life is your portfolio. You have no social security, you don't have any pension.
Mhm.
It's just your what you can draw out of your portfolio, and you have $1 million, and you need $60,000 or $70,000 a year to live on. So that's a sustainable initial sustainable withdrawal rate from your portfolio of 7%.
Yeah.
There's a pretty good bet that that's going to fail. As you a sustainable withdrawal rate means you increase that for inflation every year. So
Depends how long you need it, of course.
well, that's yeah, if you retire at 55, you're probably going to need it for 30
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're
or
90,
40.
it's probably not an issue.
That's true. And that's the whole point.
Yeah,
Or that's one of the points of these things is that the risk is individualized.
yeah.
But if you need $60,000 from your $1 million portfolio, you have no other income, and you're 60, and you have good genes, and you're going to live till 90, you're down here somewhere.
Yeah.
So you need to figure out a way to fix that. And in some cases, that can be really hard to do because when we were working on mitigating risks, the objective was to, if you had a risk down in this lower triangular half of the matrix, the objective was to move it up here, at least into the green part, where you could accept the risk. Yeah, it might happen, but I can accept it.
Hey, Daryl, if you don't mind, I have a kind of a non-financial life perspective risk that I think fits in that bottom right-hand corner too. I just read a book called Die with Zero, and it probably is influencing some of my thoughts around this discussion. And one of those thoughts is that it's guaranteed we will all die, and the choice we have is what we're going to do with the time between now and when we die, right? So if you have a list of things that you really, really want to get to before you die, and you're putting some of them off, you're just procrastinating on some of them, then they move down into that right-hand corner, right? You have this potential that you know you're going to die, that's guaranteed. But if your behavior isn't letting you get to the experiences that you need to get to when you're trying to get to them, or when you can get to them, then they shift down into that corner. And so, it's really important, not just in the world of investing, but in the world of investing across our life, that we figure out what those priorities are, and we take advantage of them while we can do them, right?
Yeah. If the likelihood you're going to die is down here, it's actually along the bottom line of this bottom box.
Right. It's guaranteed.
It's guaranteed.
That's
Now,
guaranteed. And we don't know when, right? Yeah.
yeah. And so if you have some things I can't think of what one of these would be, but if
Okay.
you have something that you must do before you die,
Well,
that would be over here.
let's
But
say you've always wanted to climb a mountain, right? Or you've always wanted to ski the Black Diamond Run somewhere, or you've got these
mhm,
things in your life that you want to check off that require good health and strength and agility and these other
mhm,
things. If you're procrastinating them, waiting until you're financially secure enough to do them, that you don't have, it's just easy to do, you may not get to them until it's so late you can't do them anymore. That's the kind of
yeah,
stuff that Die with Zero speaks about, is that it's important to do the life experiences you can in the seasons when they're available to you, even if sometimes that strains the finances a little bit. Yeah.
Did that
yeah.
book have an impact on you, Chris, in terms of uh, changing anything in your financial plan?
It did. Um, I think we, like many retirees, we've struggled with that shift from saver to spender, and so it definitely nudged us in the direction of trying to figure out, you know, how to take advantage of the resources that we have in a better way while we're alive. It kind of pushes you to think about things like gifting with a warm hand instead of a cold one, right?
Mhm,
It's better to give now, rather than wait until you die and have there be a surprise, right? So yeah, and there's experiences Susanna and I have wanted to get to that are kind of on the expensive end of things, but they're also on the physically demanding end of things. And
Mm.
so we're prioritizing those as earlier in our, I mean, we should have done them 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we're still healthy enough to be able to do some. So yeah, we're pulling some of those in. I thought it was a thought-provoking book. I didn't agree with absolutely everything in it, but I think it was a worthwhile read, and I'd encourage people to look at it.
We'll have a link to that book in our notes.
Yeah.
Okay, Daryl, and you shared earlier, you shared some information about the decision regarding uh, income and how long your income would last. I thought that was a thoughtful piece. Can you share that as a part of your comments?
Yeah. So we can look at one application of this kind of technique, and again, it's individualized and it depends on your circumstances. So your mileage may vary. Okay, this doesn't apply to everyone, but let's look at a risk of outliving your money. So let's say you've got some Social Security and maybe a small pension, but you're not sure, and but you still need to draw from your portfolio. And when you look at it and you look at the numbers and you look at your withdrawal rates and you look at your other cash flow situation, you say, it's possible I might run out of money at the end, and then I would have to live off these cash flows that I'm anticipating getting, the Social Security and maybe a small pension or something like that. So if that happened, well, it wouldn't be catastrophic, but it would have a really big impact on my life, and I would not be able to live the life I wanted to live in retirement. So it would be a pretty major impact. So that kind of fits in this square here. And that says you ought to maybe consider doing something about that. And so one of the things you can do about that would be to shift this risk from here to where its impact is not major but minor. And one of the ways you might be able to do that would be to increase your cash flow in retirement by maybe delaying Social Security so you get a bigger monthly income. Or maybe you can take your portfolio and annuitize it, or at least annuitize part of it to make up the difference in cash flow between what you would like to have and what you would have if you actually ran out of money. So this would increase your cash flow. Another way you can look at how trying to mitigate this risk would be to say, well, what can I do to make this less likely to happen? And one way you might be able to do that would be to change your asset allocation. And you can look at the fine tuning tables, for example, to do this, to potentially increase your return, or maybe have a higher safe withdrawal rate or sustainable withdrawal rate as a measure of your resiliency to volatility anyway. So you can change your asset allocation. If you haven't retired, maybe you could consider upping the ante on what your savings are into your portfolio, and you would begin retirement with a larger initial portfolio, which might allow you to maintain whatever you need to have for a withdrawal rate here. So those are two ways you can move this from here to here, from the yellow to the green, or maybe it's a combination of these things. Maybe you change your asset allocation a little bit, you save a little more, annuitize a little bit of your portfolio, and maybe you don't delay to 70, but maybe you delay to 68 or something. And so, and that moves you into this box here, and you're in a place where you can accept it. So that's one way you might consider applying this framework and how to assess mitigating the financial risks that you may have.
And working longer certainly
Yeah,
is
yeah,
is an idea as well. And
yeah.
I no,
That
I
could,
think
that
this
could
is
come in either in oversaving or delaying Social Security. Yeah, right.
now when you were a systems engineer and you were going through this analysis, I suspect you're sitting at a table. Everybody's got their slide ruler or whatever it is
I'm
that you
not
might
that old.
have.
I
And
did start
and
out with one.
but you have this discussion, And I suspect there was a lot of difference of opinions as to where things would sit on this table. What, how would a person, as an individual investor, what do you do to create this kind of thought process? Uh, find find an investment advisor or an hourly person who also was an engineer in their life. But how would you create a discussion with like-minded people who could help you through this?
Well, you're right. When we assessed risks on on various programs that I worked on, it ended up being a sometimes a spirited discussion. Fortunately, in most of those cases, we had customers that we had to work with, or we got to work with, I should say, I guess.
Yeah.
And most of the time, their opinion of what the risk was what was given more weight than what maybe our opinion of what the risk was. And so we had someone that we uh, could use to provide a balanced, or I guess balanced probably isn't the right word, but to provide a conservative estimate, meaning what the risk is probably riskier maybe than you might think it is, but it's what they think it is, and they're paying the bill. But that, so yeah, we had a roundtable discussion. We were doing this, and also on the ways to mitigate the risk too, because a lot of this, and you can look at it from here, it's not free. Mitigating risks is not free,
Yeah.
and so you need to consider the costs when you mitigate the risks. Now, for individuals, when they're looking at their own financial risks, um, this comes back to knowing the guy in the mirror, or knowing the person in the mirror, um, and having an outside opinion or an outside viewpoint on what the risk is, and how you may mitigate that is valuable input. And so, if you can get that from an hourly advisor, or another kind of financial advisor somewhere, a trusted friend maybe, that would be something that I would consider doing.
So,
Or I might say your wife in some cases, because we didn't actually, we weren't this formal about it when my wife and I talked about one of these risks, but I had a certain mindset about how I wanted to help mitigate a risk for her if I died first.
yeah.
And uh, she had a different opinion about how what the impact of that risk would be. And her opinion was that it was not as big an impact as I thought it was.
Hmm.
And so, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to think about that a little differently then. And
Yeah.
so I'm doing that.
Did you have that conversation with just the two of you, or did you involve a professional?
That one was just between us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris,
It
you were
it
gonna.
it turns out that the solution that she saw that I didn't really want to consider would involve other people. So so it will eventually involve other people to make that solution work, and their opinions on what we're trying to do would be valuable, or will be valuable when we go assess that. So
Good.
Well,
Fire away, Chris.
yeah, I was just going to say that, since this chart is about outliving your money, one of the tools somebody could use to assess the risks is a tool Daryl has created. It's the fine tuning tables. And you could
right.
go look at the different uh, withdrawal rates for fixed approaches or the different flexible withdrawal rates and see historically how much safety or variability those two provide. And I think that would be a great starting point for a lot of people. You can remove the risk of running out of money by using a flexible withdrawal rate, provided that you can live within what that provides. So that's a really interesting lever. And when I was first doing this analysis, I also used Portfolio Visualizer because you can put in an asset allocation and do Monte Carlo simulations and make assumptions about how much you're withdrawing every year and how long the scenario is and see what the probability of success is and tweak the allocation. So if somebody likes Daryl's chart and wants to apply that kind of an analytical framework and really put numbers around it, I think Portfolio Visualizer would let you go deep, and the fine tuning tables would probably give you enough information to actually make the decision. So you have a choice. And I love that Daryl brought up the the human side of the risk again too, because that's harder to quantify. But for most of us across a lifetime, there's probably at least there's a high likelihood somewhere in our lifetime we're going to want to second guess our allocation and do an imprudent trade. I say that based on my own lifetime. So
Well, I will say that one of the challenges I have, but I look at myself being more afraid of the catastrophic than you two are. From all of our conversations, you have more equities in your portfolios than I do. And when I look at the fine tuning tables and I see that the strategy, the 50-50 strategy, has built into it a 25 to 30% potential loss. And I know what that would feel like if it happened, and we're ready for that. But you two have got more equities in your portfolio, which means that according to the fine tuning tables, when I look at the worst 12 months or the worst drawdown, those numbers are higher than 25 to 30. And I really have to ask, do you believe that that is the risk that you're carrying, and are you really feel comfortable about carrying that risk? This is the struggle as we get older in terms of actually the odds are at age 81 that I have a much lower probability of a catastrophic event than you do, Chris, because you're so much younger.
because I have more years in which
Yeah.
I could experience it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you really accept it, or are you just, crossing your fingers and
Uh, yeah, there is definitely I think all of us would like to have less volatility in our portfolios. We'd like to have more security. So I understand how you get to where you are. I very much understand that. One of the things that has kept us from doing that is the taxes.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
it's in a brokerage account that's a taxable account, rebalancing and changing your asset allocation can be expensive.
yeah.
And so that yeah that I know that I would absolutely lose money if I made a big change
Yeah.
because I'd pay taxes and other things. But I also know that I'd end up with a portfolio allocation that was a little more conservative and less volatile. And so that when I look at it, those are the things that's the internal tension
Yeah.
is trying to, and I suspect there are many listeners who have a similar kind of tension. It's, I know the ideal allocation I'd like to have, but
Yep.
there's only so much I can do without incurring expenses and taxes that I don't want to incur. So
A
maybe I'll just
guaranteed loss.
choose to live with what I got. Yeah.
How about you,
Yeah.
Daryl?
Yeah. The the first part of that is that intellectually I'm happy with the asset allocation I have. Emotionally, I look at it every once in a while and I look at the fine tuning table and I say, you know, that's that's that would not be good if that happened. I would not like that. But would it, if I lost, I don't remember what the number is right now, but if I lost, that much chunk in a drawdown, would I be happy about that? And I would not be happy about that. Would it change anything about my life? No. But
Yeah.
um, other than maybe some psychic angst that might be going on. Um, so yeah, it's a little bit of a, I feel a little bit, this is good. I feel a little bit like John Bogle. Yeah, I know what I should do, but I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Well,
So
and he made the point that part of that decision was he was not in great health and he was concerned about if he went, I think he went from 65% equity down to 25%
yeah,
equity. And I think it was 2008 that he did that. And part of it was he was concerned about dying and leaving his wife and family with a lot less money than if he kind of captured what he had right there. So
yeah,
it's the magic part of this process is and we get battered around by what we read in the newspaper, possibly. I know that I went through I did some, I'm going to call it market timing of sorts, but we sold a house on Bainbridge, and the house that we had, the condo that we had purchased to replace that house was cheaper, so there was some money that could go into the pool just to support our 5% a year draw. And what I did was I ended up putting the equivalent of 4 years of income. And it wasn't necessarily a political decision, but it could sound like it. But 4 years of income that I know that we have, and don't have to touch the portfolio that is 50-50 stocks and bonds. So even if that portfolio goes down 25 to 30%, I know we've got 4 years of income there to support us. So that was a compromise in terms of uh, thinking, what about the catastrophic, and why expose ourselves to having to make decisions when the market is way down. So that's the
yeah.
that's the part that can be tough. And then, of course, when everything works out fine and you didn't need to be defensive, then you always feel like, doggone it, why did I do that? Well, again, there's no risk in the past, and we can't kick ourselves for having made a decision that was the right decision at the time.
Well, and just because it worked out well that one time doesn't mean it's going to work out well the next time.
Absolutely.
This is the exact thing that caused, not to put a downer on this, but this kind of thinking that, well, it worked okay in the past, I can probably do it again, is the exact kind of thing that caused the Challenger shuttle accident and the Columbia shuttle accident. Whereas they had gotten away with the things that ended up being the root cause of some of those accidents before, and it was okay. So they said, well, yeah, the rules say we shouldn't do that, but it's worked before. So, and you see the results.
I'm
Um,
glad you brought that up, Daryl, because one of the biggest risks I think in personal investors face is learning the wrong lessons.
Yeah.
You invest in
yeah,
a single stock and it goes crazy and you make a huge amount of money and you conclude that, oh, the right solution is to invest in single stocks. And then
yeah,
you
it's
do
called
the,
normalization of deviance.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then you do that again and you lose all your money and the first one goes to zero too, or, I mean,
Mhm.
it's really easy to over amplify these non-representative data points.
Right.
Just to sound a little geeky here for a minute.
Yeah.
And it, many times the right decision based on all of the information the academics have and the history and everything else doesn't lead to the best financial result. And then you can end up kicking yourself, even though you did the right thing, you can end up kicking yourself and regretting it because You
Yeah.
didn't get rich and the guy next to you did, right? It's a
Yeah.
really, really hard thing.
It's never the right time to do the wrong thing, something like that.
Yeah.
No, I agree, and of course, what we are trying as best that we can is we're trying to uncover every one of these forks in the road that we can say that's a risk, and we're doing our best to give guidance as to which fork to take. And of course, since we're dealing with the unknown, there are going to be lots of times when that other fork was a heck of a lot better than what was probably the best fork. And and I really feel for, and I particularly think about this with young investors. If you could just identify those forks in the road and spend a lifetime taking the right fork. I mean, low expenses is going to be something we're going to be thinking would be good for the rest of your life, as opposed to high expenses, and that, in a sense, is almost a catastrophic kind of an outcome. If you overpay expenses for a lifetime, if you overpay taxes for a lifetime, if you overpay the cost of active management for a lifetime, all of those things, you add them all up, and it's a catastrophic outcome versus what you should have had. And so that's really the belly of our work, is trying to get people to take each one of those forks in the road and do the right thing. And I don't know, as an investor, if you had to pick the most difficult fork in the road that you had to face, and this is not something we talked about before we started here, but I'm curious what you would see as the most difficult fork that you took, and then the outcome of it. I mean, many people start out with buying individual stocks, and then they see the light and they go to diversified portfolios or whatever, or active to index. Do you guys have anything you can look back and identify was a major turning point?
Well, not for me personally, but one of the things I see in many people who come to me talking about personal finance that I think is a huge fork for them is deciding whether to do it themselves or not. Um, and linked to that, it's deciding whether to become educated and knowledgeable or not. So many people come to me who have very little to no experience in investing, and they just want the solution. They want
Yeah.
you to be their advisor. They want you to give them, do this, do this, do this, and life will be okay. That's what they want. And when you explain that you can't do that, that they need to learn some things if they're going to do it on their own, they go, "Oh, I don't want to learn. I don't want to. I don't want to take the time. That's too complicated. I could never do that." And so it's very frustrating because it doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be fairly simple, but there's so little appetite or interest in it that the only real solution is probably to point them at a robo advisor or an advisor, somebody who's going to take them by the hand and
Mhm.
really walk through each and everything. And unfortunately, many of them are not of much financial means, and so that makes it even harder for them to find the solution that they need because
Yeah.
financial advisors aren't interested in small clients. And so that's not exactly the question you were
Well,
asking, but it
I
came to
think that's
mind.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daryl, would you add something there?
Um, Probably, well, the one that gives me most pause, and the reason I put it that way is because the answer is not in yet, was the decision that we took probably 20 years ago to not purchase long-term care insurance and to
Mm.
self-insure. So as of right now, we've self-insured that risk. But remember before when I talked about how, a 20 or 30% reduction in my portfolio would not change my lifestyle? Well,
Yeah.
not right now, but if one or both of us end up in long-term care, missing 30% of that portfolio could have a big impact on what we can afford in terms of self-insuring for long-term care. So when I think about it in that context, I've probably got a risk on that risk matrix somewhere that I really need to go back and think a little bit more about in terms of asset allocation and a couple of other things that we've got going on that feed into that. And so this has not just been an academic exercise to get ready for this podcast, Paul. It's caused me to rethink some of these things and
Great.
and maybe eat a little bit of my own cooking. So
You can,
That's great.
yeah, I think you can go find some data online about the probability
yes,
of
I
that
have.
for both of you. And
Yeah,
I wouldn't say, I'd say the probability of both of you needing long-term care for a long time is
right.
that's a very low probability
It
thing,
is. It, it
even though
it
it's
definitely is. I'm the
expensive
director
in
of
extreme.
analytics after all, so I have gone and analytic this. But
Excellent.
it's in the upper half of or upper two rows probably of
Yeah.
that risk matrix.
But on the
Um,
right-hand side,
well, it might not be the right hand column, but it could probably be in the left hand, the next to the right hand
yeah,
column.
yeah, yeah, it's
And so
potentially
it's
extreme. Yeah.
yeah, it's in the yellow part, which says I should at least consider mitigating this somehow. And
Anecdotally, and based on my own life experience and things I've heard in podcasts, I think most people who end up in those care facilities don't end up for many years.
right,
It's you typically, if
it's a
one
it's
to months
it's
to a
yeah,
few years. Yeah,
it's single digit numbers of years,
right.
low
But that's
low
still
single digit
expensive.
numbers of years, and yeah, that's been my experience in people I've known who've been in that situation. Um, but some of the people that have been in that situation have not had the assets to be able to be in a place that would take.
Take
Well,
all the
it's
asset.
not that they weren't taken care of, but
Yeah.
it wasn't probably the best facility that they could have.
Wasn't the one you would choose for you.
No,
Right. Yeah.
I would
Well,
not
this
choose that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
this
Anyway,
conversation started from an article that Jonathan Clements wrote called "The Risks We Miss," and we'll put a link to that article. But I just want to read the last couple of paragraphs. He said, and by the way, Jonathan Clements is one of our truth tellers. I think he does great work, and he unfortunately has a problem with cancer that is not likely to be resolved well. But he says, I don't want readers to obsess about risk, but I would encourage folks to build financially resilient lives and to avoid big assumptions about the future. Risk has now arrived for me, and it's taken a form I never imagined. Fortunately, I am well prepared financially thanks to health insurance and a plump nest egg. But what if my fate instead had been, say, decades of dementia? Would my nest egg have held up? I'm not sure there would be any way I could have reasonably prepared. Still, there's an important lesson here. While we have only one past, we face all kinds of possible futures, and it's worth asking whether there are futures we aren't even considering. And I thought the article was very good, and we all wish Jonathan the best in what he perceives to be the last months of his life. And if somebody, by the way, is going through a catastrophic health situation in the family. Reading his work, since he has been going through this himself, I think has been excellent. And gentlemen, do you have anything for the good of the order before we call it quits here today?
Well, I've heard Jonathan interviewed recently about his life experience, and he's dealt with it with such grace. And one of the mantras I try to live by is to maintain a brightness of hope. And one of the things you sense in him is that he hasn't let his diagnosis dim his hope.
Yeah.
He's still hopeful that he's going to make a positive difference. He's still leaning in on life and doing what he can to improve the world and improve the world for other people. And every single day he has then is a good day. I mean, not good in the sense that he doesn't have pain and suffering, and he talks about that. I'm sure it's been difficult, but it still gives him that little bit more good, right? And I think one of the keys to being a successful investor is having that hope that things are going to work out. So I thought the article was a great reference, and I just wanted to add my thanks for how he's dealt with this situation and been so willing to share it and talk about it, because it's been really helpful, I think, to his audience and to us.
Yeah, I agree. Daryl?
We've talked about risk in terms of having to know yourself and know how you react to risks. And so I think one of the big risks that we've sort of danced around it is, but there's the risk that you don't know yourself. And that's something that is individualized, and it's something that you really need to think about. And it's a difficult thing to do, even when you know that you should do it, and that you should do better, and those things. So I think my bottom line is that you never stop assessing the risks. You have to keep assessing them, and you have to keep assessing your attitude and your perception of it. And it's not a bad thing to say, I know I did this last year when I thought about it, I'm different now. I think it was Winston Churchill who won, or maybe that I'm probably wrong on that, but was asked something to the effect of, why did he change his mind or something or other? And he says, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? And so I think that's an important thing to realize, is to keep in the front of your mind that, your impression of of a risk now may be different than what it was in the past, and you should consider doing something different because of that.
That's great. That's helpful, Daryl. Gentlemen, thank you both. You're always wonderful. I really understand why we get so many emails talking about the help that you have been. And life is a bunch of random events, and the fact that randomly we end up together, I just feel blessed by that, and I thank you for all that you have to offer. And happy holidays. I guess we won't be
Yeah.
having any more of these this year. Maybe, or could we fit one in? Maybe talking about next year. That would probably be worthwhile, huh? What do you say?
It would be tight, but we'll see.
Okay. Oh,
we,
that's
we
right.
can we
That's
can talk about it.
we can. I know. See, Chris is always off on an adventure. That guy is
I
on
got a
his.
new I got a new granddaughter that's about to arrive, so
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
yeah,
That's
the
great.
next adventure is going to be one like others we've had, but entirely new and different. Yep.
And that's tremendous. Well, I hope you both have a wonderful holiday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Right
Thank
back at you.
you.
Yep,
All right.
same to you guys.
Interesting question for you, Chris, um, is when you look at the work you do with the ETFs, do you see that? How do you see that as a way of helping people manage risk. Now we have to define risk. Maybe your definition will fit right, in with whatever the answer would be. But do you see that as what is the risk you're helping them manage?
Well, one of the fundamental tools a buy and hold investor has for managing risk is diversification. You spoke to that in today's podcast. And uh, when I choose the best in class ETFs, one of the things I'm doing is I'm looking for funds that are more meaningfully diversified, that have exposure not just
Sure.
to small and value, but
Yeah.
also to the other factors, other attributes that. So you can think of it as having more, more cylinders in the engine. That's the way I
Yeah.
sometimes
Oh, that's
the
great. That's a
analogy I use. So
great,
yeah, there's definitely
wonderful,
something there.
wonderful. So, Daryl, on your wish list for Christmas, is there a upgrade on your internet?
Yeah, we have heard you go
You know
wonky a
what?
couple of times already today.
You know what? Now let me check something here. But you
Oh,
know what? That's a good idea. Randy keeps asking me what she can get me for Christmas.
Better internet, please.
Yeah,
sometimes when the
that's a
thing I
good
worry
idea.
about is when that happens, it sounds like you're on your last legs.
It
Oh
does.
no, he's going right here in the middle of a podcast.
That's right.
The
Yep.
pressure, I can't take it.
Yeah. Is
Can't
Daryl
take
having
it.
a stroke? Oh no. Should we call 911? Yeah, exactly.
All right, you guys, you're great.
That's a good idea. Yeah.